Across the world, the coronavirus
Coronavirus.
疫情在全球掀起
As the world descends into chaos, and many of us are confined to our rooms for one reason or another, I can't help but feel lost in the ocean of information and misinformation that surrounds the dreaded coronavirus. So I thought I would take advantage of the new time I now find on my hands and try to get to the bottom of what is really going on. Before we delve into the details, I wanted to share something really interesting with you. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? But the first case of coronavirus was diagnosed on 1st of December 2019, correct? Correct. So why is there a paper from March 2019, a whole 9 months earlier, warning us about a potential outbreak of coronavirus in China? I'll leave you to decide on your own. Check out the link to the paper in the description and look at it after this video. Let me know your thoughts on what you decided in the comments. What is a coronavirus? Or actually, what is a virus? According to this molecular cell biology textbook, a virus is a small parasite that cannot reproduce by itself. Once it infects a susceptible cell, however, the virus can direct the cell's machinery to produce more of its cell. The many copies of the virus then leave the cell and are primed to infect more and more cells in our body. Coronaviruses belong to the subfamily Orthocoronavirus and the family Coronaviridae of the order Nidovirales. What makes them special is the size of their genome, i.e. how long their RNA is. RNA is like our DNA. It's a form of a molecule that stores genetic information. And this increased size of their RNA is associated with increased replication fidelity, making the virus a more powerful tool. It might surprise you to know that the coronavirus that you now see is not actually the first coronavirus that you will have heard of. Several of the major viral pandemics of our very recent history, most notably SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, were also caused by coronaviruses. So, what about the coronavirus that we are concerned with now? Its full name is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2, and the disease that it causes is called COVID-19, Coronavirus Disease 19, for the year it was identified in. Like the SARS virus, it is a respiratory virus, which means it most significantly affects the lungs. The particular strain of the virus that we're dealing with now was identified on January 7th in Wuhan, Hubei province, China, after a group of patients with unusual pneumonia presented on December 1st, and were all eventually linked to a wholesale seafood market. During the course of their treatment, the patients underwent investigations, and voila, the novel coronavirus was identified, and thus our pandemic began. As of March 23rd, in the 3.5 months since patient zero, coronavirus had spread to at least 192 countries, with a total of 14,704 deaths and 339,712 infections. Lockdowns, travel restrictions, and other drastic measures restricting work, movement, and gathering are in place across the world. Hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and other necessities are being hoarded, and empty shelves are a common sight in many shops. Offices and stations are empty, and the skies are quiet. The economy is tumbling, with many companies going out of business, especially airlines. The New York Stock Exchange even ceased trading. Interest rates were lowered in a desperate bid to stimulate spending. I've never seen anything quite like it before. As of March 23rd, no specific treatment for coronavirus has moved beyond the trial stage. No telling exactly how long, how large, or how deadly this pandemic will become. There are, however, plenty of facts that we can state, and also reasonable predictions that we can make, and this is what I've tried to share in this video. So, how dangerous is coronavirus? As we mentioned earlier, coronavirus is a contagious disease that causes severe acute respiratory syndrome, which makes it sound pretty damn dangerous, but there are several important considerations to be made here. Firstly, different patient groups are at vastly different levels of risk. What are these different patient groups? Let's begin by looking at age. The South Korean Center for Disease Control shared the following data. Up to the 11th of March, there were 7,755 cases and 60 deaths, meaning a total death rate of 0.77%. Please do note that this death rate is substantially lower than the global value of 3 to 4%, and this is in large part thanks to the quality of the South Korean government's response to the crisis. The availability of testing kits is unrivaled, and the milder criteria for testing have allowed for rapid identification and treatment of infections. But I digress. What we want to look at is age. Out of the 7,755 cases confirmed in Korea, 2,718 were reported in patients below the age of 30, and out of these, not a single patient had died. Between the ages of 30 and 39, only one patient had died, and between the ages of 40 and 49, again, only one patient had died. Why does age play such an important factor in the outcome of coronavirus infection? The answer is not complicated or surprising, and I'm sure many of you know it already. Sadly, as we get older, our bodies deteriorate, and our immune system gets weaker. The immune system also becomes prone to overreacting, and this can lead to a condition called cytokine storm, where the immune system ends up causing a severe inflammatory reaction which further compromises the patient. Moreover, by the time we are in our 50s, we are quite likely to have concurrent health conditions, which drastically increase our susceptibility to infections that would otherwise pose little or no risk to us. If you are not elderly, and if you do not have any underlying health conditions, your risk of severe illness or death from coronavirus is very low. It is worth noting that this picture is being challenged by new data from China, France and Italy, who warn that young people are not as immune to the dangers of coronavirus as it first appeared. Li Wenliang, 34, had no pre-existing conditions, but nonetheless succumbed and died from coronavirus. Likewise, concerning reports are emerging from France and Italy about young people getting seriously ill without any pre-existing health conditions. What if you or your loved ones are elderly or have underlying health conditions? Patients over 80 have seen a 14.8% mortality rate. This drops to 8% for those aged 70 to 79 and to 3.6% for those aged 60 to 69. Likewise, patients with underlying cardiovascular disease have a mortality rate of 10.5%, those with diabetes 7.5%, chronic respiratory disease 6.3%, hypertension 6%, and cancer 5.6%. For the next section, I'm joined by Dr. Masha Krupnikov. Dr. Krupnikov is a general practitioner for Maccabi Health in Israel. Dr. Krupnikov, thanks so much for joining us. Really good to have you here. How are you today?
Well, not bad.
Can you tell us a little bit about the situation in Israel, where you are? What does it look like on the ground?
Well, people have been instructed to stay at home and get out just minimally, only for the stuff that is absolutely necessary to do. And many of the workers are home, and the workforce is supposed to be cut down to some sort of a minimum apart from the necessary industries. So something like that. So the streets are half empty. Some of the people are wearing masks, including driving cars, sitting on benches, walking alone, and things like that. Some of the people are wearing gloves, some are wearing none. So
you mentioned to me before the camera broke on the first try that there was a woman sitting alone in a car wearing a mask.
Yeah, sitting alone in a car with sealed windows, wearing a mask.
Yeah, that's
well, I hope she sleeps with it as well.
That's quite an image. Do you have any predictions for how the situation is going to evolve, both in Israel and worldwide?
It's hard to imagine. I think we will stay at home for a while. We're very close to what they have in Italy, I think. I mean, the next thing would be just, police on the streets and some kind of a curfew. Otherwise, it's similar. I mean, there's still some public transport, but they've cut it down dramatically, and so on and so on. I was just wondering how long you can sustain this. Probably you can't deal with a situation like this for more than a month. So I suppose it will start easing of it after some time. The idea behind this was that they would prepare for the outbreak. Get more ventilators, more hospital beds specifically for corona patients, make the necessary arrangements. There is a drive-through that they're building in a big park in Tel Aviv, and there's a plan to build some more of these drive-throughs, the sort of they had in Korea, where you just come by a car, open the window, and then a protected paramedic takes swabs you and lets you go home. So the moment they will be done with the preparations, there won't be much more point, I guess, to keep everybody grounded.
Yeah, and you think that that's going to happen, best guess, after about a month from now?
I hope so. Yeah.
I see. A lot of fuss is being made about the efficacy of surgical masks. Do they work?
Well, what they say is that the surgical mask should be enough, unless you're doing something, unless it's a patient in severe distress. I mean, the official regulations are that if you're intubating somebody like this, you need to wear the HEPA mask, and the surgical mask is not enough. But if you're just dealing with a corona patient in a stable state, then it should be enough. Yeah, so you can wear surgical masks for most of these cases.
Yeah, and what about for people on the street who don't have any contact with known coronavirus patients? Should they be wearing masks?
Well, at least the theory behind it is that if you're further than 2 meters, you don't need a mask because the droplets won't reach you anyway. So I think wearing masks in a supermarket, if there are more people than you would like there to be, is okay. But also they always warn people about this fake sense of security that you gain from the mask. I mean, you should always keep in mind that you need to wash your hands, and contacting the virus from doorknobs and stuff around you. I mean, it becomes more real if you're wearing a mask.
Can masks be a source of contamination as well? Can they become themselves a source of infection if someone's not cleaning it adequately?
Good question. They say that once they're damp, they're not affected. But I don't know. I don't know if it can get as so bad that it will actually promote you getting the corona. But
Next thing I wanted to ask about is that I understand that researchers in India are proposing HIV drugs, and researchers in Australia are proposing chloroquine, which I believe is an anti-malarial drug, as treatments for coronavirus. Do you have any thoughts of this and other treatments promising?
I think there is a half official protocol for treating the severely affected patients. So I know that the first severe patient we had over here who was ventilated, initially got chloroquine, which didn't improve his situation, and then he got this experimental antiviral drug that they have also proposed as a possible therapy, and then he improved, whichever, I don't know if it's the drug or just that enough time has elapsed for his body to recover, but he was weaned off the ventilator.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. And going on from that, there currently is no vaccine for the virus, but teams in America, Germany, and the UK are claiming to be close to one. How helpful would a vaccine be in the current crisis, and would it arrive in time?
Ooh, it would have been nice, yeah.
And so, even with the amount of cases that are already existing, would a vaccine have a significant impact on slowing the spread of the virus?
Well, it depends how effective the vaccine is. Every vaccine has its own efficacy rate. But I guess, yeah, it will probably change the picture in quite a dramatic fashion. And then, of course, if you're vaccinating, then you can maybe claim that, a week after the vaccine or 2 weeks tops after the vaccine, you can start releasing people, back into the streets.
And my next question is, many people are claiming that the danger of the virus is being blown out of proportion by the media, and that the panic that we're seeing, with the consequences affecting people's work, affecting their ability to buy supplies or food, and even affecting their ability to access healthcare. So people are saying that the panic is not actually proportionate to the real danger that the virus poses, and is more a reaction to media, which is promoting that panic. Do you agree with that?
Well, I tended to agree with it initially, but then since the situation in Italy has become so bad with so many deaths, it's quite hard to keep staying in that position. Because obviously, it really depends on the kind of resources the health system has, but usually, I don't know who has a health system with so many intensive care spare beds, because what happens in the end is it's that they're either the corona patients who are being ventilated and other patients don't get the care that they need, or the other way around. And so somebody will die. Maybe they won't be dying of corona, but maybe they will be dying of other causes.
And is the reason why this situation has arisen purely because there is no present immunity against the virus? Or is it something about the disease that the virus causes that it actually separates it from, let's say, a severe flu?
Well, it's similar to the severe flu, but just we haven't had the severe flu in 100 years. They keep comparing it to the Spanish flu, which was, I guess, in 1918 or 1920.
Yeah, so literally about a century ago. My final question is, to most of the people watching this, who will be young, healthy adults with no pre-existing health conditions, what is your advice for the coming weeks?
Well, my thought is basically, if you're a healthy young adult, chances are if you ever contact the coronavirus, you probably will not die or become very seriously ill. But also, they say that in Paris, I haven't seen the statistics precisely, that some of the very ill patients are actually young people without any comorbidities. So it's hard to claim. Also, it's a mutating virus, so it could theoretically happen that in some areas it behaves differently. So it's very hard to predict. So maybe what we have in Europe isn't already the same virus that they had in China, or the one in Israel isn't exactly the same we have in Spain. I think that so far, let's try to support the efforts, because it really depends on everybody participating in them. And of course, maybe you will not die, but maybe if you pick it up and spread it out to a few more people, somebody will die in the end. Maybe somebody's grandmother or mother or a sick relative or somebody else. I mean, maybe you're not saving your own life, but you're saving somebody else's life.
Of course, and that is very much the sentiment that I've heard from many people here in London. So that was all of my questions. Thank you so much again for your time.
Welcome. Well, stay safe, stay at home.
Picking up from that, let's talk about preventative measures. Face masks. What does the science say? Dr. Shenmay Yeung from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine says that the virus isn't floating in the air, so the mask is not protecting me against anything in the air because the virus is not there. She goes on to explain that the virus enters our body through mucous membranes, the mouth, eyes and nose, and unless you're in close contact with an infected person, at which point you are at risk of inhaling virus droplets, face masks don't actually do much. A friend of mine did point out that a mask might prevent you from touching your nose and mouth, and this certainly seems to make sense. Conversely, Dr. Krupnikovs, whom we spoke to earlier, suggested that face masks may even lead to a false sense of security that will lead you to discard much more important measures, like washing and sanitizing your hands regularly. Furthermore, according to the CDC, most face masks, including the surgical ones that most people are wearing, do not effectively filter small particles from the air or prevent leakage from around the mask when the user inhales. Next up, let's look at hand washing and sanitizing. According to this article, both soap and rubbing alcohol effectively destroy viruses such as coronavirus due to their chemical properties. So hand hygiene is, at least currently, the most important precautionary measure to take. The third item is something that we have alluded to before: contact with others. Keep a distance if you're out and avoid skin-to-skin contact like handshakes. Stop touching your face, scratching your eyes, rubbing your nose and biting your nails. Anything like that is a sure way to bring what's on external surfaces in very close contact indeed with your mucous membranes. So my conclusions based on the above, and this very much echoes the advice of Dr. Krupnikov: wear face masks only if you are in crowded places or in close contact with an infected person. Keep hand sanitizer on you at all times and make sure that you regularly and properly wash your hands. Instructions on how to do this can be found in the description of this video. Avoid contact with others where possible. Much has been said about the comparison of coronavirus with regular flu. So how do they actually compare? Let's have a look at this graphic from Vox.com. The first metric that we'll look at is the RO number, which estimates how many people will be infected by an average individual with the disease. As you can see, COVID-19 nearly doubles that of flu. And I think this is very much to do with incubation time. For flu, the time from exposure to first symptoms is 1 to 4 days, meaning that you relatively quickly become aware of being infected and are able to isolate yourself from others. With COVID-19, you might be incubating for 1 to 14 days, meaning that you could be out for a whole 2 weeks without being aware that you are shedding virus. The hospitalization rate for flu is only 2%, whereas that for coronavirus is 19%. This, I think, is very much to do with the fact that we, as a population, have very little immunity to coronavirus, or practically none, and this means that many more people contract it. The case fatality rate for flu is 0.1% or less, whereas that for coronavirus is up to 3.4% globally as it stands. This again is to do with the fact that there is no immunity in our population, and therefore predictions cannot be made about which vulnerable individuals are going to contract the virus. The number of coronavirus patients is becoming a very serious burden on healthcare systems, and not only this, there is a knock-on effect. With the number of patients hospitalized and requiring ventilators, you end up with a situation where either COVID-19 patients cannot access the necessary treatment, or that other seriously ill patients cannot access it because of the burden of the COVID cases. Finally, I would like to look at how different countries have fared in their response to coronavirus, and we'll start with China, where it all began. The situation in China very quickly turned disastrous. By January 24th, there were 830 reported infections, and only a month or less than a month later, February 17th, there were already 70,548 cases, with 1,770 deaths. But then something changed. February 18th saw China's daily infection figures drop below 2,000 for the first time, and this trend continued. The daily infections continued to drop, and the crisis had plateaued. So what happened? Starting in mid-January, the Chinese government introduced sweeping measures to curb the progress of the virus. Initially, this involved stopping movement in and out of Wuhan as well as 15 other cities in the Hubei province. Soon after, people in many Chinese cities were told to stay home and only venture out for food and medical help. Furthermore, almost 20,000 medical staff were mobilized to help tackle the crisis. China reported just 20 new infections on Monday, bringing its total cases to 80,860, of which 67,000 patients have already recovered. This is certainly a piece of optimistic news that we much need in the dire situations that many countries now find themselves in. Italy. Italy has taken over from China as the epicenter of the pandemic, according to the WHO. It has almost 31,500 infections and more than 2,500 deaths as of March 19th. On March 20th, Italy overtook China as the country with the highest fatalities. What's quite interesting is that the majority of the cases are in the north of Italy, the wealthier part of the country which has top-class hospitals. This very much disputes the argument that poor quality healthcare is behind the high mortality rate in Italy. The situation has become so dire that extreme measures of triage, usually only seen in wartime, have been advised to medical staff. This entails choosing which patients will receive the very limited supply of treatments and which won't. Currently, focus has been advised on those under 80 without any comorbidities, presumably because they stand the greatest chance of surviving with intervention. Italy has imposed an almost total lockdown on citizens, with only supermarkets and pharmacies open. Curfews and travel restrictions are in place, and the situation does not yet show any signs of improving. Germany has also adopted strict measures restricting travel and gatherings of more than 50 people. Its borders with Australia, Switzerland, France and Luxembourg and Denmark were unilaterally closed. The total case number is 7,636, but only 12 deaths have been reported, and this number really stands out when compared with the global fatality rate. It is believed that the slow fatality rate is due to the widely available and effective testing, as well as a country-wide systematic approach to the crisis. Widely available testing has proven effective elsewhere, like in South Korea, which we discussed earlier, where drive-through testing sites have been made available. The fatality rate in South Korea is 0.7%, compared again with the global rate of 3 to 4%. In France, a strict curfew is in place, with citizens being required to justify any ventures outdoors and facing fines for any non-essential activities. More than 11,000 cases have been confirmed, with 491 fatalities. Finally, the United Kingdom. The government here has been heavily criticised by scientists around the world about its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. The lack of stringent measures, such as an enforced lockdown, which has been adopted by all other significantly hit countries, has led Anthony Costello, for example, former director at WHO, to label the UK's government as reckless. The rate of fatalities is now rising faster in the UK than in Spain, and the government still has not taken the drastic steps that most people are now simply demanding as a starting point. The situation continues to develop. So, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the video. I hope that at the very least you have found new considerations for your perspective on the ongoing crisis, and at the most you feel ready to tackle coronavirus in the coming months. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, and as always let me know, which truth would you like to hear next?